Well, today is Saturday, April 2nd, and today we're taking another deep dive into the human impact of the war in Ukraine and sharing the stories of some refugees you may not have heard about yet. Among the millions of people fleeing are tens of thousands of people who are not from Ukraine but still need a safe place to go. And their stories suggest they're facing additional obstacles because of their race, citizenship, or both. We're joined today by award-winning journalist, author, and former CNN international correspondent, Isha Sesay. She's also the host of the new podcast, The Accidental Activist, and she's a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. She shares the stories of African students living in Ukraine, explains why she feels some of the news coverage of what's happening has been offensive, and offers a way for everyone to get involved, even if it's as simple as posting on social media. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Aisha, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
It is so good to be with you. Thank you.
So by now, Americans have heard a lot about the millions of refugees that have fled the violence in Ukraine. But that statistic and really most of the news coverage doesn't tell the full story and the full range of experiences, does it?
No, not at all. I think at the latest count, as we have this conversation, it's about 4 million people who have fled Ukraine, obviously mainly Ukrainian, but in that story are thousands of people from other countries, thousands of African students, Indian students, Chinese individuals who were in Ukraine when this war broke out, searching for an education. These people now find themselves in limbo. They find themselves in various predicaments in various countries. And that story isn't being told. The story is being told purely with a gaze focused on Ukrainians. And that's just not the full story or range of experiences.
And can you explain for people who may not know that it's not necessarily as easy as just taking a flight home and getting out of there?
I wrote a piece about this because when the war broke out, very quickly, it started to emerge on social media that there were thousands of African students who had gone to Ukraine because tuition fees are relatively affordable in that part of the world, in that country. So they'd left their homes from Africa to Asia and gone to Ukraine in the hope of completing advanced degrees that were beyond reach in their native countries. So for a lot of these people, they were there doing, studying medicine, engineering, nautical sciences. And suddenly the war broke out and they found themselves with very little money, with little to no community to turn to, and really without a pathway home. And unlike the response for Ukrainians, which has been by and large welcoming, with the European Union setting up all sorts of different arrangements to welcome them into neighboring countries, African students have had a very different experience.
So tell us a little bit more about the specifics of what some of those students have told you they've experienced.
I spoke to one actually just a few days ago who, she told me the story. It was hard to even take it all in. She had been in Ukraine studying and was in the third year of a medical degree. And she was now in Germany, where she luckily had family. So she had gone to take refuge there. She explained to me, and it's really illustrative of what a lot of them are going through, calling different universities in Europe to see whether she could transfer there to continue her education. And in this one particular call, the person on the other end of the phone says, "Oh, absolutely, we can accept you. And here's the support that's on offer for for you to come in and get settled. We're going to support you this way, this way, this way." Multiple different things are offered to her. Then she says, "I'm not Ukrainian. I'm an African student who was studying in Ukraine." And she is told by the individual, as she tells me, and I've actually seen this in other reporting, she's told by the individual, "No, that is not open to you. You are not able to access those benefits and that support. That is only for Ukrainian," which was shocking to hear. And you hear now from other people that they're in limbo in Hungary, in Poland, where even if you're not just talking about education, just where do they stay? Where do they go next? Their visas that they're being given are different in some cases, as I've been told by individuals, from the visas that Ukrainians are getting, because they don't have European visas. So now they'll only be given 15 days to stay in Europe. What do they do next?
Why do you think this is happening?
I think that And the reason I pause is because I want to be careful in terms of the language I use and the motives ascribed to policymakers and decision makers. But I think it's really comes down to this perception, and it's playing out in the policy of some people suffering being more worthy of assistance than others. Now, why that is, I'll let people decide, but there's definitely a hierarchy in this pyramid of suffering and who gets help and who doesn't. And I think that, to take it a step further and to be more transparent in my thinking, I think that even if you look at the coverage of this conflict, as you said, people of color, and I know here I'm specifically talking about African students, but Indian students have talked about their difficulties in getting out of Ukraine. People of color from all walks of life have talked about the difficulties. That bias even manifests itself in the coverage, in the absence of these people's stories or the minimization of their stories. And as somebody who's worked in news for a very, very long time, that's something that I saw in newsrooms when it came to choosing whose story should be told. And very often Black and brown people's stories are just at the bottom of that pyramid.
Yeah, and you wrote in a recent article that some of the coverage has been infused with racial bias. Can you provide an example or two of what you've seen?
CBS's, correspondent, he said while reporting on this conflict, and he was in Ukraine at the time, he made the point that this is a civilized country. This is not where you expect this kind of thing to happen. And it's not Iraq or Afghanistan. And those sentiments, those comparisons have come out in various ways from various people. We've had that commentary on Al Jazeera, on BBC, people just lamenting the fact that this would happen in Europe. These people are us. We see ourselves in them. You've had foreign ministers say they look like us with their blonde hair and blue eyes and really kind of feeling an affinity for their suffering. And listen, everybody should care about the suffering of Ukrainians, but their suffering is no more acute than the suffering of people in other parts of the world, right? And let's not get into kind of comparatives of suffering and pain. Let's focus just on humanity. And let's not also make it seem as if other parts of the world have an affinity for chaos and instability. Therefore, if they are suffering, they're kind of used to it. As an African, as someone who comes from Sierra Leone, which is a country that's had a brutal civil war, it offends me. It offends me on the most visceral of levels to hear this kind of coverage, to see it almost normalizing violence in some parts of the world. And as I say in that piece, the impact of that is perpetration of this idea that some people's suffering matters more. And as an extension of that, they require more help and support.
I know you've talked about that news coverage and even social media hashtags can make a really big difference, probably both good and bad.
Africans in Ukraine is a hashtag that gained life or momentum on social media. And, as somebody who has had a very love-hate relationship with social media in this moment, and increasingly, I am so grateful for social media and the emergence of hashtags that people can come together around. We saw that with the Chibok schoolgirls who were abducted in 2014 in Nigeria, a story that, I worked on extensively, wrote a book about. Bring Back Our Girls was a hashtag that emerged there. And I'm just so grateful that there are these spaces where people can share their stories and can mobilize. People came together and continue to raise money, to source resources for these stranded students. They're using it as a tool, and a tool that can have positive impact.
Still ahead, what can the world learn from these lesser-told stories? And what ultimately pushed Isha to become what she calls an accidental activist? But first, let's take a quick break to thank our sponsors. Getting a good night's sleep is super important to me. And even when I can't get as many hours as I would like, I at least want the sleep I do get to be high quality. So I do my best to set myself up for success, and a big part of that is loving my sheets. Boll & Branch sheets are smooth, soft, and breathable. Maybe that's because Boll & Branch uses the best 100% organic cotton threads on earth. In fact, the sheets are made with threads so luxurious, the company says they're beloved by 3 U.S. presidents. Boll & Branch signature sheets, the ones that I now have on my bed, come in 9 versatile colors, and they come in all sizes. They're 100% free from toxins, meaning no pesticides, formaldehyde, or other harsh chemicals. And they're labeled with top and bottom tags, so making your bed becomes easier than ever. Best of all, Boll & Branch gives you a 30-night risk-free trial with free shipping and returns on all orders. And the Newsworthy listeners can get 15% off your first set of sheets when you use the promo code Newsworthy at bollandbranch.com. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND Branch, bollandbranch.com with the promo code Newsworthy. We also want to thank the Newsworthy sponsor, Rothy's. I now have 3 pairs of Rothy's shoes, and 2 of them are Rothy's best sellers, the Point and the Flat. And I love them both. They're easy to slip on for pretty much any occasion, and they're stylish, comfortable, and washable. In fact, People magazine named the Point the best flat for their first ever Style Awards last year. Of course, that's not all Rothy's offers. They always have a bunch of different colors, patterns, and styles of shoes to choose from. And no matter what you get, they'll be comfortable right out of the box and still look great years later. Plus, I always have to mention how great Rothy's is for the planet. And we're talking about everything Rothy's makes. This is a company that has repurposed millions of water bottles into their signature thread that then goes into all of their products. It's easy to see why millions of women, including me, wear Rothy's shoes every day. Step up your shoes and accessories this spring and get ready to be asked, are those Rothy's? Plus, get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/newsworthy. That's ROTHYS, rothys.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to my conversation with Isha Sesay. What do you think the world can learn from hearing these students' experiences?
What I hope the world will take from it is our common humanity. I've talked a lot about empathy before in various spaces, and I've always said that it's a renewable resource. We've got to be in a space where people readily tap into their concerns and feelings for other people, whether they look like them or not, whether they pray like them or not, whether they're in their backyard or not. And I would hope that in a time of a pandemic, which we're still in, a pandemic which means global by very definition, which means the whole world, I would have hoped that we had reinforced our common bonds of humanity. And sadly, what has happened in Ukraine, what is happening in Ukraine, and the way the story is being covered and the way people are responding to it, and I'm talking about decision makers, it shows that we still have work to do.
I know you're a Goodwill Ambassador to the United Nations. So what should organizations like that, as well as the individuals, us listening, what should both be doing to help in this situation?
Yeah, I work with UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, with a specific focus on women and girls. In the case of UNFPA, they are very much in the thick of things on the ground in Ukraine. And, we're seeing maternity hospitals being bombed. We saw those horrible pictures from a few weeks ago of pregnant women being evacuated from bombed out establishments. UNFPA is on the ground responding, providing supplies, and meeting the specific needs of women and girls. I think in all of these situations, individuals, organizations, it is about being equitable in the support that you give for people on the ground. It's about, as individuals, it's about donating. It's about sharing the information. It's about amplifying people's stories. I think there are many things that we can do. I have podcast, The Accidental Activist. And the point that I stress in this brand new show is find where you can make a difference. It's not the same for everyone. For some people, it's donating. For some people, it's marching. For some people, it's petitions. And for some people, it's amplifying information. Get in where you can. But there is room for every one of us to have an impact at a time like this. And if not this issue, find your issue. Find what you're passionate about. But there is so much that's wrong with the world right now. We need everybody to play a role in making it better and more just.
Yes, and your new podcast, The Accidental Activist, were you an accidental activist?
I most certainly was, or I most certainly am an accidental activist. It largely sparked by what happened to those Nigerian schoolgirls back in 2014. As I've said, I come from Sierra Leone, one of the poorest countries in the world. My parents are educated. Their parents weren't. And I've seen the gift of education and the returns on that investment. Because my mother was educated, I am educated and have had the life I've had. And I call that the lottery of life. And with that, I've always felt a sense of responsibility to give back. But I think what happened in Nigeria with those girls really crystallized the urgency of the moment and the urgency for formalizing what I do. And so, yes, that was my spark, my accidental activist moment, where once I covered it for CNN, it didn't feel enough when the story faded from public view. It felt to me, for the reasons I gave, my personal reasons, and also just from being in a newsroom and seeing how quickly stories of Black and brown people fade from public view, it felt like I had to do more. And that's how I embraced this work.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing and for the information that you're sharing. Any final thought to leave our audience with about this topic?
I think one of the things I say to people is that read more, open your minds, open your hearts more, be interested in what's happening around you, not just in your own backyard, but across borders. Lean into your empathy. And I think I would definitely stress to people to understand in this moment, because I think we live in such a beautiful, complicated moment where our voices and our actions are more potent. Believe in that power for good. That's what I'd leave people with.
Well, thanks again to Isha Sesay for sharing her reporting and insights with us today. Again, her new podcast is called The Accidental Activist. She's also the author of a book about the 2014 kidnapping of a group of Nigerian schoolgirls. We have links to both in our episode notes. We'll, of course, keep you updated on the developments in Ukraine and the other news of the day you need to know during our regular 10-minute roundups available every weekday at 4 a.m. So we'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.